So welcome everyone. It's 3:01. Sorry we jumped on a couple seconds late. Marian, you might want to monitor my email. I'll monitor my texts because we did jump on a tiny bit late. So if we lost anyone, they usually will send me an email or a text. So we'll give it a minute for people to hop on. We sent out a reminder this morning. Well, I think you got it too, right, Karen?
I did, yes. Thank you. I love reminders.
I know. And I think, let's go ahead and get started. Only for sake of time as people are starting to hop on. You know, hey, Betty, welcome. Hey, Arena. As people are starting to hop on, we can start, with our quick housekeeping and intro before we get into our great conversation. Sorry, we started just a minute late. Welcome. Hey everybody, welcome to the Spa Hive. If you haven't been to our weekly webinar series, I'm Julie Pankey, and I'm excited to be talking to Karen Smegal Butler today from Hutchinson Consulting, when we're going to be talking about staffing. Let's see, Betty said Zoom made her update. So yeah, I think people could be having a few glitches, but that's okay. I'm excited about this topic. So we're really excited that we are doing the Hindsight is 2020 webinar series. And we just finished our first segment of the series, which is about managing expenses and our operational costs. So my mission or my purpose for bringing you this series is because we all say, oh, hindsight's 2020, right? And I always think about all the things that I should have done or could have done. And now we've all had this pause. And we've had this pause, and it's given us an opportunity to look back at our businesses. And when we say, if I was to open my spa again, what would I do differently? It gives us the opportunity to do those things differently and start again on the right foot and build our foundation right from the bottom up. So we felt that the first 3 episodes talking about back bar expenses and managing your expenses was kind of, your base, your foundation. Next, our next 3 episodes is going to be about our staffing because next layer of that foundation for our business is our team. And so it's a vital element, and it's really critical to get the best team in place, keep them motivated, excited, retain them for long term. So welcome, Karen. If no one has met Karen before, if anyone has not met Karen before, Karen's based in Vermont, and she works with Hutchinson Consulting. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Karen. I think we've known each other for a really long time. I was trying to remember if it was before Essex even. I can remember at iSpa. So was it, I don't know when, right? But it was a long time ago. Long time ago. And I'm excited to bring Karen here to talk to you guys about our staffing. So Karen, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I've been in the spa industry, the hospitality industry, for more than 20 years. So Julie, I'm sure it's been a long time that we've known each other. But as a recruiter with Hutchinson Consulting, essentially I'm a professional matchmaker is how I like to describe it. And helping, spas and hotels and restaurants, senior living facilities, find the ideal management candidates for their companies. Before I was with Hutchinson, and I've been with them for, gosh, just over 2 years now. But before that, I was a spa director for quite a few years. I started out in the industry as a receptionist, and then moved my way up to director of massage and assistant spa director, and then to spa director. So I've certainly done a lot of interviews in my career and have figured out what works, and unfortunately have experienced what doesn't.
Great. Well, we're so glad to have you. And I'm so great to bring, I'm so excited to bring, a professional expert matchmaker to the table here for our audience. So what better presenter that talking about hiring our staff than Karen. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, Julie.
So we have some questions.
Okay.
Of course, same as every webinar. If you have questions, the chat line is open, so drop them in there. I'll be monitoring it. Marianne will be monitoring it. So don't wait to the end. Any questions that you have, feel free to ask. We have some questions that came in prior. So if that happens to spark anything, then go ahead and drop it in the chat. So during the hire process, does the hiring process need to be structured? Or can I wing it? So, I feel like a lot of people that I work with, they're like, oh, I'm going to put an ad on, Indeed, and I want to hire some people, and let's just kind of do it, and then, people apply, and then they, schedule an interview, and then they don't show up. And, so, do you think that it should be like a structured process? I like to do a phone interview first because I don't want to waste their time or my time with an in-person interview if it's not going to be a good fit, and kind of having like a process of how you hire. What do you think? Or just wing it?
I think it's really important to be able to adapt within an interview, so that's kind of my winging it component. But I really, really believe that in order to have a productive interview and make sure that you're, covering everything that needs to be covered, it really needs to be structured. You want to make sure that you're touching on all the important topics. You want to make sure that you're asking each candidate the same question. That really makes sure, or it ensures that the interview process is fair. You don't want anybody to come up afterwards who didn't get the job and say, I feel like I didn't get it because of, and those hot topics, that age, sex, gender, religious preferences, things like that. So if you structure your questions and you lay it out, it'll make it so much easier and safer liability-wise in the end.
Yes. I was helping hire a spa director position. Now it's probably 3 years ago at a resort here in Maine. And there was a very interesting candidate. I'm not sure if he was a professional scammer, but, we never set up an in-person interview. And he then accused us of being, discriminatory because we didn't set up an actual in-person interview. But then I was helping a spa down on Cape Cod hire. The same person applied and pulled the same thing. And he went to like the Department of Labor. He contacted the HR departments for both hotels. I, of course, connected the two hotels. But, he was like, you didn't meet me because, I'm a gay man. And he went into all this stuff. And I was like, it's scary, right?
Yeah, it is. And you really need to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And you want to make sure that you're utilizing your time efficiently, so by having everything laid out in advance and knowing what questions you're going to ask, it will definitely help that process, go a lot better.
Right.
I think when I structure a job interview, You know, I like to make sure I have a clear job description so that I can go over that with the candidate. You know in advance what hard and soft skills are important so that you're looking for those during the conversations. Create role-specific questions that's going to help determine, you know, if that candidate is going to be a good fit. And then also adding in some general interview questions afterwards.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's your favorite interview questions? Give me like one that's serious and one that's kind of like funny or fun so that you get to know the person a little bit.
Yeah, those are great questions. My favorite, I would say my favorite, there's a couple of them that I consistently use in interviews. I really enjoy asking them how they ended up in the spa industry or how they ended up applying for this job if they've never been in the industry before, because I feel like there's always a different answer. And those answers are usually interesting and tell me more about who it is that they are, you know, and what they're passionate about.
Right.
You know, as far as funny, I don't know as though I go the funny route. You know, I really try and keep interviews very clean cut and professional, you know, so that it stays on topic. I feel like icebreakers are great questions, but I don't know as though I go the humorous side of it. You know, I like to, you know, ask them if, you know, tell me something about your last job other than money that would have inspired you to keep working there. You know, and that usually produces a really good answer. And then I always like to end them by asking them, is there anything I haven't asked you that's important for me to know about you in regards to this position?
That's great. I love it. I couldn't write those down fast enough, but I'll listen to the recording so I don't forget. So that you don't have to take notes, this will be recorded and everyone will get a copy, as you know, like every week. And we'll send out our top 5 takeaways, which I think those questions are great takeaways. Betty had a question. Karen, how would you work with me/us on filling an already difficult position to fill? So based on your experience, would you advise me straight out? Based on your experience, would you advise me straight out that this would be a virtually impossible position to fill? How do you actually work with us, the spa management team? So Betty is a spa director at Saybrook Point Inn, and she wants to know how you work with people directly. And, you know, are you honest about, you know, when it's a tough position to fill? Betty, what kind of position is virtually impossible to fill? Let's see if she answers. But how do you work with the management team as a team? You know, be part of the team.
Yeah, I love to learn as much about the position as possible. You know, what are the obviously the main responsibilities that they're going to have, but what are the pain points? Why have people left that position or not stayed in that position before? You know, I take a look at the job description to make sure that it's a fair reflection of what they'll be doing. We look and talk about, you know, the rate of pay. You know, is it fair for industry standard? Is it fair for the area? And you know, based on those conversations and getting to know the property and what their expectations and needs are, I like to be very transparent. It does me no good to say, oh, we can absolutely fill that. That's easy. I have a ton of candidates, when in reality, I don't. If it's going to be challenging, I will be very upfront. And I feel like my colleagues, you know, here at Hutchinson Consulting are as well, is saying, you know, this is going to be challenging, but here's what I think we can do. And then roll it out from there, and then, you know, go out and see what we have for candidates to present. And then constant communication back and forth is absolutely crucial.
I had a question about what Betty was asking. So her question, the role is lead massage therapist / esthetician. So a combined lead position. Or a treatment lead, essentially, that's a dual license. So if you were recruiting for that kind of position, what does that look like? I mean, do you meet with, the management team to see, what they've done in the past, what they're looking for? Do you feel like, it kind of trickles down from the top? And so if you think that there's going to be a challenge, you talk about it right up front.
Yeah, if I think that there's going to be a challenge up front, I'll definitely discuss it right in the very beginning. If, as the process goes along, I'm realizing that there's a challenge, then that's when, I'll bring it to their attention. Going into it, it sounds like, Betty, you already know that it's a tough position to find, and I don't disagree. But I think that it definitely is possible. Sometimes we have to change our expectations and think a little bit outside of the box in order to find what that ideal candidate is. And it may be a massage therapist who doesn't have aesthetics, licensing, but has an understanding of what's required, or the same, vice versa. It's an esthetician who can't do massage, but is open to understanding what their needs and their challenges are and working with them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hired a fabulous trainer one time in New Hampshire at a resort, and she was a massage therapist, not a licensed esthetician, but she was in the business so long, and she made it like her purpose, to make sure that she knew about all the services, and she was just amazing about guest services and about rules and about creating really amazing protocols that she became our lead trainer, and she trained all 3 departments. So it didn't mean that we didn't have a supervisor in each department, but she was our trainer, and she learned every protocol, and everyone respected her and loved her. They weren't like, you're not a nail tech, so you don't know what you're talking about, because she really commanded, the respect, and she got in and, rolled up her sleeves and got her hands dirty with them and worked with the vendors so that she knew. So was she giving a facial, for example? No, but she knew what went in to an amazing facial. Let's see, Betty said, if anyone, oh no, that was me. In Connecticut, licensing for estheticians now required by July 1st. Yeah, but your treatment lead, Betty, doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed esthetician, or if you get around it by, like Karen suggested, a trainer position from somebody that's really amazing, rather than a trainer in each department, right? That's a suggestion. Yeah,
and as far as leads go, I mean, a lead needs to be a good leader, and there's certain qualifications and a skill set that person needs. And that may be different from the person who is really good at training. So to have, some crossover, or have kind of a trainer who takes care of the facial trainings, and then maybe a massage therapist who's great at overseeing staff and is very approachable, that's okay too.
I like that. I like thinking outside the box, so that, prompted us to kind of think outside the box a little bit. Thanks, Karen.
You're welcome.
Let's see. Sometimes I get a lot of applications for a position. What's the best way to determine who to interview first? Is there a way to look at that?
There is, and I think it's something to really consider given the times that we're in. So many people have been laid off or furloughed and aren't working. Is that, the spa that opens first may very well get an influx of people applying. And I think you have to know how to handle that in advance so that you can be productive with that and you don't feel as though you're overwhelmed and then, push everything to the side. What I tend to do is, when I know that I'm going to get, a lot of applications, or I see that there's a lot of applications starting to roll in, I really I know it's not friendly for the environment, but I'm a tactile person. I like to print the resumes. You can also save them to, a folder or somehow set them aside, but I really like to print them out. I will go through them, circle what I love. I will highlight what concerns me. And then based on all of them that I have, I'll number them in order. I'll give a 1 to the candidates that appear to have everything, that I'm looking for. A number 2 goes to candidates that have, most of the qualifications, but there's some red flags, whether there's grammatical, mistakes in their resume, spelling errors, lack of attention to detail. They may have relevant experience to the industry, but their job, stability is a little concerning. Maybe they're only at each place for, a year or less. And then 3 is those are the ones that really have no relevant experience and no longevity in previous positions or other red flags. So by figuring out who my top candidates are and who my bottom candidates are, that's the order that I start calling them in.
Nice. I love it. I know it's always so hard, right? When you look at it and you think, oh, this person would be great, but they've had like 8 jobs in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, do I take the chance? And they don't always make your like number 1 list. Mm-hmm. I guess they could be your backup, and sometimes they do work out. Mm-hmm. But it is, it's nice to think about if there's any like kind of red flags at all.
Yeah, and I think somebody who hasn't been in a position for a long time or has a tendency to switch a lot, there can be good reasons behind that. And I feel like sometimes they really do deserve the chance to explain themselves and be given the opportunity. If everything else seems, like a good fit, and in your gut, you're like, yes, this person is it, to give them a chance for the long term.
Right, exactly. So this is a great one. So we've made our decision. Mm-hmm. Do we really need to follow up? So we hire, let's say, Betty is hiring 3 positions, even just her 1 position, and she's got 10 candidates. Do we need to follow up with all 10, even if we didn't make contact with them to begin with? What's the right thing to do for follow-up and, being courteous to, our applicants?
Yeah. What I've learned over the years is it's a small world. Everybody knows everybody, and your reputation can be made or it can be broken very quickly. So personally, I really believe strongly in following up with each candidate. They took time to fill out your application, and sometimes it's quite lengthy. Sometimes they're sitting there hoping because they know so much about you already and they would love to work there, that's kind of where they're putting their eggs. Not always the smartest decision, but that's a loyal person right there. So yeah, I really, regardless of whether or not you spoke to them, to send them an email at the very least saying, thank you so much. We've chosen, a very well qualified candidate. We appreciate your time in applying. For candidates that have been, for in-person interviews, especially multiple ones, I feel like a phone call to say, thank you so much for your time, but we've, decided to move into a different direction or decided to make an offer, to another candidate. It's just very respectful to do that. And one thing that I do with, when I'm going to send an email, I actually create an email signature that has everything in there so that I can just change it. I change my signature number depending on how your email system works, and then put in their name and, the appropriate specifics of the position, mm-hmm. and then send that. So I don't feel as though I have to recreate, an email.
Like a template.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking as you were talking, have you ever had the situation, when you've called someone back and they're like, can you tell me what the other person did better, or why you hired the other person over me? What do you feel is a good, safe answer?
Yeah.
I have had that happen, and it is uncomfortable.
It definitely can be, but it can be really helpful for that candidate who didn't get the position. Mm-hmm. And when you think long-term, by giving them some information and some insight as to why somebody else got it over them, it's helping the industry, whether it's the spa specifically or hospitality in general, if they have a passion about it. So I'll tell them, I had a more qualified candidate overall. Sometimes that's it. They just have been in the spa for longer, and that makes more sense, or they've had more management experience, or there's opportunity for them to grow into a different position relatively easily. And sometimes it's harder conversations to say, I really felt that you moved around too much. You've had 3 jobs in the past year and a half. I'm really looking for somebody on my team that can commit for 3 to 5 years, and giving them that feedback.
Right. Let's see. Regina said she loves to ask where they see themselves within the next 5 years. That's a great question.
It is always a great question, very revealing. And I bet, 5 years ago, had you asked that, I bet nobody had this situation picked out. That's for sure.
Right, exactly.
And if they didn't hire them, because they can see the future.
Right, exactly. Oh gosh, right. And then Betty says, do you research the properties they say that they've worked for to see compatibility with the property seeking the employee? Do you fact check and reference check candidates before or after an in-person interview is set up?
So I've done it both ways. There, in my role now, I've had companies that will not interview a candidate. I kind of do the pre-screening behind it. They will not interview a candidate until I have references checked. That's, I think, the exception rather than the rule. The majority of the time it would be, checking references afterwards, because if you have, 20 or 30 applicants, it's not possible time-wise to check all of those references first. You want to make sure that you're really going after, the ones that you feel strongly about.
Right. And then the property, the compatibility of the property, bless you.
Thank you.
So let's just say, you're hiring for, a resort property. Let's just say up here in Maine. And, and you're hiring for a front desk manager. And you have a pool of candidates, and none of them have come from, a 4-star resort property, but you have candidates that came from, a reputable day spa that, may be applying for this. I mean, so how do you look at that? So if, I'm hiring for a property up here as a, let's just say, front desk manager, would you discount the people that are applying that are coming from area day spas that maybe have the same position or, have worked as front desk for a long period of time, and that could be their gradual next step? So Betty's question is, do you research the properties they say they've worked for to see compatibility? So I guess the question is, how do you determine compatibility? Because they may not have come from a compatible property.
Right. I always will research and look into the property that they're currently working at, and typically the one before, just to understand where they're coming from, when they come into the interview, assuming that, I want to bring them in for the interview. I don't necessarily do it to determine whether or not I would interview them, because I feel like sometimes people end up at a location that isn't who they are at heart. It's a stepping stone for them. Either they wanted to learn a new skill, they had just moved to a new area and they needed a job, to fill in the blanks, and then they're eventually moving on, and hopefully with you, to, an environment that they're very comfortable in. So I like to know about the company so that I can better ask them questions about, their experiences there and how they would tie into my, spa or hotel.
So then determine how compatible they would be for your client that's searching.
Right.
Got it. And so talking about doing research, do you look at their social media?
All the time.
I love it. I never hire anybody without looking at social media, right, Marianne? Well, I mean, as a spa director, or I mean, as a consultant.
Yeah, and
they're all over social media, and if I can't find them, Marianne can. Just beware.
And I had done a webinar a couple of weeks ago where we talked about social media and its uses. And what I found through my research is that about 74% of employers look at people's social media before the interview. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to hire them if they don't like what they see, but people definitely are checking it out.
Awesome. Still taking notes. I'm taking notes. Betty's asking questions. Let's see. Arena wants to know which websites other than Indeed do you recommend for recruiting, hiring?
That's a great question. Indeed, H Careers, LinkedIn, Facebook. I would say those are probably the ones that I use most often. iSpa, Green Spa Network.
Of course.
The industry ones. There's a lot of great
ones.
Right,
Day Spa Association, or what? It's a Spa Industry Association now. H Careers, Facebook. It's funny because I never thought of this before until maybe a year and a half ago. That LinkedIn is a really good resource for hiring.
Yes. And
what I also found, a little tidbit, is that you rank higher on Indeed listing if you're also listed on LinkedIn. And I tested it because somebody told me it. Told me this. We were hiring, opening staff, so massage, your regular staff for a spa in Massachusetts, and they put it on Indeed, but then it was like buried. It was many, many posts down, and I'm like, we just posted it. Like, why is it buried after, Massage Envy and their 10 posts? So we did some research and it talked about it. So we put it on LinkedIn, and the next day it became like the top post. So it's something probably with an algorithm. But I thought, I never really thought to post on Indeed so much, especially for like regular positions, massage therapists, estheticians, other than managers. And that's more through like networking, right? But it's a great resource.
It is, yeah. I feel like H Careers and Indeed tend to be great for line level staff. LinkedIn, really, I find more manager level and above on that website.
Let's see. So what order would you recommend interviewing? Phone interview, treatment practical, on-site interview? Like, when do you do the treatment practical? Do they get to like the final stage, or is that before they're in the final stage?
So typically what I do, and I'm assuming massage therapists and estheticians is who they're referring to, is I'll do a brief phone interview. I do try to keep those short and sweet because I feel like you can't learn as much about them, over the phone as you can in person. So I'll just ask basic questions and make sure that they can answer me in a, professional and respectable way, and then move them on to the on-site interviews.
Right.
And typically what I'll do is I will interview them in person. And then as long as they're not coming, from a far distance, I will then, if that interview goes well, I will then set up another day and time for them to come back and do a hands-on practical approach. If I know that they're driving an hour or more, I will say, what we'll do is, we'll sit down and talk first. And then if that goes well and it looks like it could be a good fit, what I would love to do is set you up, afterwards to do a massage or two. and then move them right into it.
That's great. That's so great. Let's see. Do you have any onboarding tips? So we find the right candidate for this position. What are some of your onboarding tips? Training, orientation, mentors, etc.
Yeah, onboarding is really important. I feel like the importance of structuring your interviews also carries over to onboarding. And to have a successful onboarding will directly impact whether or not you have a successful employee. So what I typically do is, when I became a spa director, I had been at a couple different properties. One of the first things I did was always take a look and see if they had a process. But really, you want to know, and make sure you have a list of everything that the new employee needs to learn. Then create a realistic timeline of how long it's going to take them to learn that. And talking with your staff who have already done the position, to hear their feedback about, how long does it really take to learn this computer system, or this task or this protocol. And don't rush to put somebody through it. I know it's so hard, when you're short-staffed or, you're really busy, you want to just get them on the floor, but it's not going to set them or you up for success. So I think if you can take your time and then, make sure that you're being positive and promoting relationships. Mentors are really, really important, I think, for somebody to feel connected. And have that one contact person they know they can go to with any question that they might have. And then finally, I think checking in with new employees regularly to make sure that they're feeling that the pace is comfortable for them. Because some people will learn things really, really quickly, and other people will have a challenging time. And just because they're having, a challenging time learning something doesn't mean that they're not going to be a great employee.
Right, exactly. What was the other question? Okay, so hiring and having a great onboarding is essential. So how do we move a good hire into a superstar employee?
Yeah.
So do you know when you're doing the phone interview and an in-person interview, do you know that they're going to be a superstar? Or sometimes do you just know that they'll probably be a good employee, but how do you transition them into your rock stars?
Yeah, there's definitely been people that I've interviewed that I get really excited about. And I'm like, I can't wait to have you on my team because you're going to do amazing things. Then there's other people who I didn't think would necessarily like rattle my world or do anything magnificent, but they really turned out to be, some of my best employees. So I think the important thing is that, when you have employees, you have to let them know that you trust them, and give them responsibilities that are going to help them grow. And you'll see which ones absorb those responsibilities and want more, and will learn how to do it well and then be ready for the next task. Those are the people that you kind of have to figure are going to be, your rock stars as far as growth.
Right.
Somebody can be a rock star and just be happy doing what they're doing. And that's okay too, because to have a rock star front desk person, I am so happy because that's a tough position to fill. And if they're going to be content there for, 3 years, 5 years and do a great job, that's not a bad thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we need people in every position, and it's so great, to see people that are in, every role, like a, spa attendant role that really just loves their job, loves talking to people, loves what they are doing, and, then really making them feel important and valued, right, will help continue them, on the path of wanting to be rock stars because they love to feel, appreciated and valued.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. For them to be respected and appreciated, that's so important. You have to learn to figure out ways to reward employees, especially when they're not expecting it. Like do it some random time when, not when their review is coming due. Ideally, if you can reward them, financially, money always talks, but it's not always possible. So as long
Right.
as the staff understands that, our budget just doesn't allow it, and in the times that we're in, it doesn't. But if you can, set up anything with your vendors so that they get gratis products or, a free treatment every now and then.
That's
People go
exactly
over
what
that
I was
line.
thinking.
Yeah.
People love that.
Oh, they absolutely do, because a lot of the products that we find in our spas, our staff can't really afford.
Right.
So it's a treat, it's a splurge, it's something they wouldn't normally get.
Right. And even at wholesale costs, it might just be something that they can't or won't choose to spend their money on. And they would love it. I mean, I used to, like, some good ideas that we used to do were, like, if we were in a resort, we would do like a quarterly contest for the front desk. And everyone, like, if we reached a certain goal, everyone at the front desk got to go have dinner at the restaurant. Because that particular resort, as an employee, you couldn't eat at the restaurants. So, we made the goal tied to closing sales. So closing sales for the massage therapists, estheticians, and nail technicians. And this is the goal for the quarter. We reach it, we all go. So things like that, kind of thinking outside the box, using your vendors, like you said, Karen, because they'll kick in gift cards and things like that. And treatments are amazing. I mean, people love to get treatments, and it costs you very little.
Right.
But it's a great kind of, like, incentive, more morale booster. So tell me, we talk a lot about, and we laugh a lot, and we see the memes about millennials. And so many of my clients are like, millennials, and they don't want to hire millennials. They're like, they're the bane of my existence, those millennials. However, millennials are growing up. And what do we need to look at for the future? Do you think that this, regarding millennials as they age, or the upcoming Gen Z? So I love millennials. And I, always talk my clients kind of off the ledge about hiring millennials, because, we need them. But what makes them tick is a little bit different than what makes maybe us tick. My generation, older generations. So, what's the truth, about hiring millennials?
Yeah, so I love millennials. I mean, I really do, because when it comes to technology, I mean, I consider myself pretty savvy. I didn't grow up with it. I was in college by the time, I had internet. So I adapted to it. But millennials really, they were teenagers, so they were ready for that when everything started to explode. So they are my go-to person for anything technology related, to understand, how to approach Instagram versus, Snapchat versus Facebook and all of those social media sites. They just have so much knowledge, and I appreciate that. And Gen Z, they're younger. They're just starting to enter the workforce. I feel like they're, up, between 8 and 23 years old. They don't know life without technology, which absolutely blows my mind. But they're fun too. Both generations, I feel, they want work that's fulfilling to them. And so a company's mission and values is really important for them to understand and buy into. So you want to make sure that for both of those generations, that is made very clear. If you don't have a mission statement, definitely create one, because you're not anytime soon going to get away without one.
Absolutely. That's a huge, huge tip.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone that's listening, you really, really need to make sure that you do have that mission statement.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Both generations, I feel like, are very financially motivated. You know, millennials, I feel like it's because they have a lot of student debt to pay off.
Mm-hmm.
So they need to pay their bills, so they need that money. Where at this point, Gen Z, they're showing to be probably the most educated of all the recent generations. And that's kind of hard to say that that's how it will progress because they're still so young that we're not really fully seeing it. But what I'm sensing is that they don't have to work. Their parents are saying, focus on school, focus on sports. So a lot of them are coming into the workforce after graduating college, and it will be their first job. So something to note is that, when hiring Gen Z, you need to have structure. You need to have job descriptions laid out. They need to have their hands on that. They need to know what's clearly expected. And financially, they're motivated by the struggles that they're seeing now. Parents being laid off, not having jobs, having to really scrimp and save, and that they want stability. They want to know that they'll be okay living day to day.
Yeah, and that's, I haven't thought of that, but because I don't know about you, Karen, but my first job, I think I was 14.
I was as well.
That's a little different, right?
Yeah, I think it's very different because we learned, how to greet a customer, how to take care of something, or the responsibility of showing up to work at the right time, and not late, and being expected to stay for your entire shift. That it will be a struggle, but if you're prepared for that in advance and you set very clear expectations, I think it will definitely help in the long run.
Right. Absolutely. So we just have a few more minutes with Karen. So if you have any last minute questions, drop them in the chat as we finish our discussion. Because she's here to answer any of your hiring questions. So definitely reach out. Plus, in our follow-up, Karen's contact details will be in there. So if you need help, you can contact her for sure. And I know that she'll be happy to help you going through this process. And that brings us to where we are now, which is the COVID pandemic world. Do you see any trends or new things that candidates are looking for in their next position in light of this COVID-19? Flex time, demanding insurance, are you still recruiting and hiring now through this process? And does it look any differently than it did 4 months ago?
Yeah. So up until recently, I feel like, the industry was put on hold and we weren't, working to fill any actively open positions. In the last couple of weeks, that's definitely changing. And we did have, a couple of people who were offered positions this past week. So it's definitely opening back up again. I think, candidates are definitely expecting and will appreciate having flex time and, not having, this is your sick time, this is your vacation time. So if it can go to either one, that will be really important. Health insurance, I think, is very important as well. I mean, it's definitely on the forefront of everyone's mind. And what I've typically seen is that the younger generation wasn't as worried about health insurance. They're young, they're healthy, they're not going to get sick. But the reality is, that has changed. So I feel like, the younger crowd will definitely be looking for health insurance. The other thing, and probably more important than the two that I just mentioned, is non-monetary factors. Compassion and understanding as people come back to work. Some are fearful about being around the public and being sick. It's, they may be returning to a job that they love, but they're coming back with apprehension. So as managers and owners, we need to be very aware of that and make sure that we've done everything that we possibly can to make sure our staff is safe, but we need to communicate that to them. We can't just, give them a bunch of policies and procedures and protocols and say, this is what you need to do now. You need to do that and say, this is what you need to do now, and this is why. There's needs to be a lot of explanation that's happening with them. I think there needs to be a lot more flexibility when it comes to scheduling. I know that's not always possible, but you have people, especially with young children, whose, daycares may not be open.
Right.
They may be working with family to try to make things happen. And if it's possible, allowing people to work from home, even if it's not, for a shift, because obviously a spa cannot run remotely. But
right.
But can your leads come in, after hours or work outside of their shift to do things like checking inventory and ordering?
Right.
Can retail inventory be done early in the morning or late at night? When I was a spa director, I had 3 young children. I had 3 under 5.
Mm-hmm.
And I was managing 2 spas, and one had just opened, and life was crazy. But I was so grateful because my employer allowed me, I would work, that 8 to 5. I would go home, have dinner with them, give them their baths, read them their stories, and then come back after the spa had closed to, check my emails, to do retail inventory, to whatever reports needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can have that flexibility, or allow them to do some of those reports or SOPs if they need to be written from home,
right,
that will go a long, long way with the staff.
That's great. Those are great tips. And right before we end this, can you finish with your top 3 expert tips for recruiting, hiring, training, getting through this process?
Yeah. So my top 3, let's see, I think, for interviewing, you need to be candid about the challenges of the position. Be right up front about that. Don't sugarcoat everything. Don't make it look rosy, because the reality is they're going to get in there and they're going to see it and they're going to be like, this isn't what I signed up for.
Right.
And they're going to leave. And there's truth to that. If you don't tell them about the things that aren't so much fun, that's going to hit them pretty hard. At least they can prepare for it. When they're coming into their first couple of days.
I love it. I always, especially if you're hiring a manager,
yeah.
You have to be honest and be like, look, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but you work nights, weekends, and holidays.
Mm-hmm. It's non-negotiable. With a smile on your face.
It's just right, painting a truthful picture,
right?
Because you don't want them to come back and say, oh, I didn't know I had to work 4th of July, especially if you're on a resort property.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Be honest. That's the best thing.
I love it.
I like to look at the skills and the traits of my staff who are most successful in each position. And so that as I'm going into those interviews, I can hopefully be picking those out, of those candidates. And maybe somebody who doesn't appear perfect but has those key traits, I'll teach them the rest.
Yes, that's awesome. I love that tip.
Yeah. And then I think the third thing and the last thing is just to make sure, and I think I mentioned this a couple of times earlier, but job descriptions are really, really important. They need to be updated. They need to be given, I give them to every candidate during the interview, the ones that I feel like are going to progress. Take this home,
Mm-hmm.
Look at it, give it some thought, let me know what you think, and let's talk again in a couple of days. I also would post them in every break room, or where staff has ready access to them so that they can see them, because you don't want somebody to feel as though they don't know how to do their job, mm-hmm. or they don't know what's expected. So if they have questions, come to me, let's talk about it. If you don't feel as though you understand this, let's chat. And then if, a lot of the times they're like, hey, I do this all the time. I feel like this is part of my regular duties, but I don't see it on here. So we add it, we revise
mm-hmm.
it, and then we repost.
So it's nice. It's a living document, right?
Yes, it absolutely is.
I love it. So I didn't see any more questions come over the chat. If anybody has any last minute questions, definitely drop them in. But I think that we successfully bombarded Karen with questions. Don't forget, we have coffee chat every Thursday. So this Thursday, we do have coffee chat going on. And then next Monday, we're going to continue our conversation about staffing and building a great team of superstars. We want you to have a great team of rock stars that will put in longevity with your business. So next Monday, we're going to be talking about strengthening your team and secrets to motivating and inspiring your team for success. So you hired great, you used Karen's tips, you got in some really great new employees. Now, how do you continue to reinvent, polish, inspire the team, and keeping them inspired? And our guest is going to be Denise Fuller, who's the founder of NASImpro and has also spent many, many, many years in the spa industry, as a resource in hiring and recruiting herself. So thank you for joining us today. A huge thank you to Karen Butler for joining us in the Spa Hive community and sharing her wealth of knowledge and top tips for hiring the very best employees. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Julie.
And have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Karen.